Savvy Central Radio, drawing out the best from our guest with your host, Christina Nitchman.
Get ready and start your engines for our 4th annual Aviation Month at Savvy Central Radio. Hello everyone and welcome to Savvy Central Radio. This is your host, Christina Nitchman. Each week Savvy runs weekly broadcasts providing entrepreneurs and successful individuals a platform to express their dreams, hopes, lessons learned, expertise, and wisdom with the world. Our guest today is Jeffrey Robert Moss, or is affectionately known in the aviation industry as MossY. MossY is Certificated 2010 National Flight Instructor of the Year, a subject matter expert on transitioning single-engine piston pilots directly into single-pilot jets. In addition, MossY is a Gold Seal CFI with 11,500 hours and over 6,000 hours of dual instruction given. Find out more about MossY today at facebook.com/MossYCFI. Hi, MossY. Welcome to Savvy Central Radio. How are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you very much. Talking to you from East Texas.
Wow. Well, I've been seeing your pictures online on Facebook and everywhere. You are everywhere. You're one of the paramount instructors out there. You are a certificated flight instructor, as you just taught me, because most people say it incorrectly. But you are here to join us for our 4th annual Aviation Month at Savvy Central Radio, and I'm excited to have you join us here. But before we get started, share with our audience a little bit about your background and what launched you into the world of aviation.
Well, I'm 43. I live in Los Angeles, which I have to say is one of the great general aviation meccas of the United States, if not the world. And I grew up in Miami, and having been on the playground or gotten in trouble in elementary school for looking out the window at many of those Phenom 747s that would fly overhead, and I always had a love of the 747, and after my parents first took me on one when I was age 7, it was a love affair that still continues till this day. And when I was 19, I went to Arizona State. I was dating someone, and they got me a pilot for a day program at United Airlines, and I flew a 747. The new model had come out only a couple of years earlier, called the 400, and it was the best video game I ever played in my entire life. And at the end of that experience of flying, the very first plane I ever flew, which was the Boeing 747-400, I turned to this training captain at United, and I said to him, hey, listen, obviously I enjoyed this experience. How do I get my pilot's license? And he basically told me that I needed to go to a small airport and learn in a Cessna, and that's exactly what I did. And I went and got my pilot's license after many hours already in the 747 simulator, and thus still flying the 747 simulator, either a 74 or a 777. Brings back those memories as a kid, and I try to do that at least once a year, which puts a big smile on my face.
Wow. Now, most people don't start there. They actually end up there many years later. That's awesome that you had Pilot's Day where you were able to experience that early on. Now, you've had a quite active aviation past and history. Share a little bit about what brought you to where you are today, because after you finished with your private pilot training, you've gone on, you got your instrument rating and commercial and multi, I'm sure. Share how you got to where you are today, because I see you all over the globe training pilots of all sorts. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I think, what we call in aviation the ratings train is I slowly got on the ratings train. I mean, I was quite happy with my VFR private pilot's license in college, and I still continued to fly Boeing 747 simulators all over the world. And as I continued to do that, many of my friends who flew the 74 as training captains would often say to me, when I would have instrument questions, when are you going to get your instrument rating? I used to kindly reply to people, what do I need that for? I can land a 747. But eventually, friends did convince me that I needed to get my instrument rating, and I added that on. And then I didn't do my multi-engine, interestingly enough, for many years. It was only when I really saw that there was a need as technically advanced aircraft started to come to the market. And I'd often dreamed, having first learned on a glass cockpit, I would have dreams at night that, someday, glass cockpits are going to come to general aviation. And it took longer than I expected, but eventually that did start to happen. And at that point, I really jumped onto the ratings train and certificated myself on all of the CFI tickets and ground instructor certificates that you could. Mm-hmm. And I think a precipice moment for me that happened in aviation was I was hanging out at an air park in Phoenix called Stellar Air Park, Papa 19er, and a friend of mine walked out, and I was standing there in a 747 T-shirt and jeans, and I believe I had flip-flops on, and I was just literally eating a sandwich watching airplanes come in and take off. Another friend of mine who flies for United, we were at flight school together, and I was standing there, and he walked out, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing. I'm watching airplanes. What does it look like I'm doing?" And he said to me, "You want to take a ride with me in my Citation CJ? I've got to take it to the service center." To which I looked at him and said, "I don't have a type rating for that." To which he turned to me and he said, "You don't need one. I have a single pilot type rating for that. Just go with me. You can do the radios." And I said, "How am I going to get back?" And he said, "You can take Southwest." And I looked, around and I said, "You know what? You get a deal." And I jumped in this Citation 525. It was a straight CJ, and off we went. And I was glad that my friend Randy was the first exposure I had to it, because Randy was a commercial pilot, and he was a phenomenal aviator in terms of single pilot operations. And it reminded me of my early days of learning the 747 at a young age, where I would sit on the jump seat of these 74s and 777s and be totally fascinated and would soak everything in. Well, there I am in the right seat of the Citation 525 with Randy. I got to be honest with you, for the first half hour, I was completely lost. I was amazed at how fast things happened and the ability for a pilot to fly the aircraft completely by themselves. And by the time we landed in Sacramento and we pulled in, I turned to my friend Randy and I said, "I'm going to learn how to fly these things single pilot." And I took the plunge and I jumped into the single pilot community with the Citation 525, the CE-525S being my first jet type rating. And I think what had happened with me is I was kind of amazed that as I looked for good instruction in that community many, many years ago, it was extremely hard to find. Mm-hmm. And I had started teaching on the Cirrus from day one, obviously being a glass cockpit nut. The Columbia 400 came out, the Lancair certified Columbia 400, later became Columbia Aircraft, and then now it's known as the Cessna Corvallis TT. And I got active in that instructor community, and what I tended to find was it was very difficult to find instructors who had airline experience, professional level flying experience, and then able to translate or distill that down to the general aviation community. And I think that really set my path for where it is today, where I became incredibly passionate about teaching single pilot IFR operations, and more particularly how it pertains to single pilot jets. And today I hold about 5 or 6 single pilot jet type ratings. I keep adding on an additional one as new single pilot jets come to the market. But it truly is, I think, next to the Boeing 747, my number one passion in flying, which is single pilot jets.
Wow, that is an amazing history, MossY. And we really do need good instructors. I myself don't have all that many hours learning to fly. I have just a handful myself. My partner's really the pilot in the family, but I love to fly, and one day I plan to get my pilot license. But wow, looking for a good instructor is not easy. So having a good instructor out there like you is so important. And I'm guessing from what I'm hearing from you that as you get into the more complicated aircrafts, especially glass, that it gets more and more complicated to find a good instructor.
Yeah, I think, it's gotten a lot better. We have now in the single pilot jet communities between the Phenom, I teach on Citation Mustang and the CJ series. I teach on the Phenom 100. I teach on the Phenom 300, the Eclipse 500, the Premier 1A. My goal is to teach on the Honda jet as well as the new Cirrus Vision jet, 2 new jets that we're hoping are going to come to market in, if not late 2015, definitely in 2016. We now have at least about a good, 10 people, I would say, that are really good and outstanding instructors in the area. But again, I still do get phone calls from people always looking for great instructors. I mean, I just came back from an advanced heavy jet type rating, and we left after 4 days. And one of the contributing factors to leaving the course was we had what we deemed to be a very poor instructor who wasn't willing to listen to the student and sympathize with us and try to customize the training to what met the student's needs. And after 4 days, we got fed up and we left. So, I think those kind of experiences are good because they remind you, for someone who does teach aviation and teach flying, that, you're supposed to learn from those experiences so that, when you're in front of your students, my goal simply is I'm very passionate, I'm very systematic, and have a methodical way of teaching SOPs. And you want people to learn from it. At the same time, I think they have to have fun while they're learning.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the reasons I loved Rob Machado's work, because it really helps you get ingrained into you the information, because there's this humor to it that helps you retain it a little better. Now, I'm wondering, MossY, because as a new student, would you say someone who's wanting to go into commercial flying or air transport that maybe getting started with glass is a good idea and not starting with steam gauge?
I actually, do, although, I mean, there's two sides to the coin. I think, many of us, as glass cockpits came to general aviation, that topic came up. And the issue you run into is it's hard to take a six-pack pilot and set them loose on glass. It's a whole new scan. It's what we refer to as I/O, information overload. And yet, at the same time, there's also a danger level in taking someone who only knows glass and putting them into six-pack. I think I was part of a committee that had strongly recommended back in the day that there needed to be endorsements or something to the effect that if you learned instruments in a six-pack plane, you needed to get an endorsement for glass, or if you got your private pilot's license on glass or instrument rating on glass, you needed an endorsement in order to fly in order to fly instruments with a six-pack. But today, I think, look, we're seeing a whole new transformation with the iPad and all glass cockpits. I think, look, glass cockpits are here for the future. I mean, that is the way the new generation of airplanes are going to be designed, with glass. It's lighter, it's easier, it's less energy, less failures go south on you. And I think, for the old-timers, if you need to go from one to the other, you've got to make sure that you get really good quality training on that different platform.
Yeah, I get you. For me, myself, I've flown only six-pack, and with my partner, he's transitioned into the SR-20, so it's glass. But for me, when I'm trying to fly, he says, hey, you take over. I can't follow all of the information, and you're quite right. It's total system information overload. I'm like, oh, give me back the six-pack. I can't deal with all this information coming at me. So I think it really would be a good idea to have like a transition.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just people have to understand going from six-pack to glass is that it's a different animal, and there is you need to get some good training on how to learn the different scan and understand that there is it's going to take you at least 20 to 30 hours to get some time under your belt to get used to the new scan, as we refer to.
Yeah, and what I always think is very important is no matter how much experience you have, it's always a good idea, I think, to always not feel that I have too much under my belt, that I don't need a teacher, no matter what you're learning or how long you've been doing it. What I'm hearing from you, MossY, is that you love to learn, that no matter how long you've been doing this, you still are in learning mode. Am I correct?
I'm always in learning mode. I think, my official position as an aviator is I'm an okay pilot, and there's always room for improvement, and I take that same attitude and translate it over into my flight instructing, that I'm an okay instructor, and there's always room for improvement. And I do really enjoy learning a new airplane, no matter how big it is or how small it is. I enjoy learning something new, whether it's an avionics system, a flight management system, whatever it is, a concept, an operational philosophy. I just really enjoy learning something new. I think the addiction for me in aviation is it keeps my mind truly engaged, and I don't think I'm ever going to know it all in aviation, and honestly, I don't think I want to know it all in aviation. It keeps me on the edge, and it keeps me learning, and I do love it. For having been a C student in high school and college, when I finally got into aviation, the passion really ignited. I enjoy getting into the books and trying to learn as best as I can, and I like to watch videos to also learn. I'm a visual learner, and I truly do think that the learning aspect in aviation for me is one of the true addictions.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that same mode of what you're talking about, being curious and learning, could be applied to all parts of your life and just make your life that much more valuable and exciting as you just realize that, hey, I don't know it all. Tomorrow I can learn that much more, both in the cockpit and in life. Now, with all of your experiences teaching and, in aviation, what has been some of your memorable experiences in the cockpit?
Clearly the most memorable experiences for me is I get an incredible opportunity a couple times a year where I get to take an aviator who has never flown a jet before. And so this is somebody out of a Mooney, out of a Bonanza, out of a Cirrus, and all of a sudden they come to me and they dry lease a Citation Mustang or a Phenom or an Eclipse, and there they are now, sitting in a jet for the very first time, and I get to watch them start the engines, go out to the runway, and then I'm, turn to them and say, okay, you ready to take off? And they go, sure. And I say, okay, here comes your first takeoff in a jet. And you get them airborne, and I like to immediately, within the first 10 minutes, just get them to a practice area. And one of my styles is I like to disconnect the autopilot, turn all the screens off, and I just say to them, just go fly the plane for 10 minutes. Up, down, left, right, just connect with the plane, as a lot of Boeing instructors will, and Airbus instructors will say. It's an airline term. Connect with the plane. And when you see them get connected and they're moving up and down in the sky, and I take a couple pictures of them with my iPhone, I know that's a special experience. It was memorable for me the first time I flew a jet, and I get to be a part of that. And I think it's a big day in one aviator's life, the first time that somebody lets you loose in a jet. And no question, those are incredible, memorable experiences, and I'm very blessed to be a part of them.
Wow. Well, I can attest that being the first time flying and being let loose, or sort of, being told, here, feel the airplane, here, turn, giving the basic instruction of how to bank and such. It was a most amazing experience. I can't imagine what it's like in a jet. What are the differences that you experience in flying a jet as opposed to a piston engine?
I think the biggest thing is, it's kind of like being on a boat in a calm pond. It's very smooth. It's very different. There is no vibration that's being generated from the prop. And it's a different feeling and sensation of flying. I mean, we've all sat in the back on airliners and felt what that's like. But when you're in the cockpit with the control column or the side stick in your hands, and you're making your control inputs, and you have a fistful of throttles, and you pull them back, and you push it forward. It's a very different sensation. And clearly, I think, one of the biggest hurdles that people have to get over in learning to fly a jet is speed control, as they don't slow down as quickly as prop planes. And so it's I kind of refer to it as like being on a ski boat in the lake, is that when you pull the power to idle, the boat keeps going. And so eventually it slows down, but it's very similar. And so you have to teach people the speed control. But other than that, I mean, everything happens much quicker. But it's a different sensation, and you've got air conditioning blowing on you. It's pressurized. There's very little noise except those jet engines that are whirling behind your ears. And it's truly, sensational, and I truly do love it. I'm very blessed that I get to be a part of it.
Well, I can see you totally love it. And you made me laugh there when you said about speed control, because I had forgotten I did get in the simulator of a T-38. I went to space camp some 10 years ago, and they let us fly an actual Navy T-38 simulator. And I kept racing past the runway, and they kept on saying, you just passed it, slow down. And it was like, you have to think so much faster in a jet than you did and at that point I had done a little bit of flying in a Cessna, but nothing compared to how fast you have to think ahead of the airplane in a jet. Is that true?
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, I think the military, teaches, their pilots from day one in turboprops, and then transitions them in. I think, pilots only know what they know, and what you don't know is what you haven't been exposed to. So, I mean, there are some examples of where you can take low-time pilots and bring them on into jets. But, you know, we're all used to, whether it's a 152 or an Archer, is we're all used to what we're used to. And then the only thing with a jet is that things happen quicker, and it just takes time till you get into the swing or the mode of things of how much quicker they happen and how your actions and reactions have to be, you know, adjusted to make it all work together. But the good thing is almost most aviators are able to pick it up and get it accomplished.
Yeah, that's great to know. So one day, maybe, because I'm really eyeing the Honda jet. It looks fabulous. And one day I have that in my pictures of the jet. I'd like to have my first jet. What advice or tips or suggestion would you like to offer any pilot transitioning from piston to jet?
Well, I think the biggest thing is the single pilot jet community. That world has changed a little bit. In the old days, people would go from a Cirrus, from a Mooney, from a Bonanza, some high-performance plane, the old days turboprops, and the insurance people would say, oh, you want to transition yourself into a jet? Well, you're going to have to get some turboprop time and buy a Meridian or a TBM or a Pilatus before you can do that. Well, that is not the case anymore. We actually have no issue at all at transitioning a single-engine piston pilot directly into a single-pilot jet. I have taken pilots with 100 hours and an instrument rating and transitioned them directly into a single-pilot jet and gotten them their single-pilot jet type rating. I've taken pilots with 200 hours, 300 hours, 400 hours. I've run the gamut. So, you know, a lot of people ask me, you know, do you have any difficulty with pilots learning to fly single-pilot jets, and what area would you say in? You know, I'm writing a book on single-pilot jets right now that's due out in a couple months. And the interesting thing is I actually have more difficulty with somebody coming out of a turboprop aircraft into a single-pilot jet than I do with the normally aspirated single-engine piston pilot. For instance, the SR-22 pilot. If somebody comes out of a Cirrus SR-22 with 300, 400 hours, moving them or transitioning them into a single-pilot jet only takes me 7 to 8 days max. And at the end of the 7 to 8 days max, they're type rated. Now, are they good to go fly the jet on their own? No. They have to go through what we call supervised operating experience, where they have a mentor pilot, where instead of now getting the type rating to fly the airplane legally, now they're under supervised, you know, supervision. And that supervised experience is where you actually put them through the real aspects of flying the airplane. Up, down, departures, arrivals, restrictions, speed control, icing situations, weather. And it's those 50 to 75 hours of mentoring that's required. That's where people really learn how to fly the plane. And then once that experience is done, then we want the people to go to the full motion simulator. And there's several facilities around the country. You know, we have CAE and Flight Safety that have full motion sims. There's a great new company out now called ProFlight, which does an absolutely fantastic job. And we want people to experience the full motion simulator, see what it's like to handle real emergencies, electrical, landing gear. And then after that experience is done, usually right then and there, no matter how many hours they have in the aircraft, insurance will let them go. So it's not that hard to transition from a single-engine piston directly into a single-pilot jet. I think where a lot of people run into difficulty is a lot of people tell them to type in the simulator first, and we just don't recommend that somebody going directly from a single-engine piston to type in the simulator first. One of the benefits of typing in the aircraft is you can actually do your multi-engine rating at the same time you're doing your type rating. So you don't have to go out and learn in a piston-powered multi-engine airplane. You can actually learn the multi-engine procedures that you're going to need in the jet when you go to fly a jet. So there are a lot of benefits of doing the type rating first in the aircraft and then going to the simulator. The simulator maybe is great for the pilot who's been flying 10, 15 years with lots of turboprop time or turbine time underneath their belt. Then that transition tends to work out okay. But otherwise, it's no issue at all taking a low-time, single-engine piston pilot directly into a single-pilot jet.
Wow. And I know we spoke a little bit before our interview that you even had some pilots that had some challenges, learning challenges and such, and you really helped them transition with no issues. Could you share a little bit about those stories?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a dear friend of mine, I did his type rating and his mentoring on his Citation Mustang, called me on the phone and said, you know, I have a dear friend of mine who owns a brand new Phenom 300, and he has dyslexia, and can we come sit down and talk to you? And I said, absolutely. And I sat down with this gentleman, and this gentleman had, 2,000 hours of flying helicopters, and he said, look, I would love to, learn to fly an actual airplane, a fixed wing, but I'm more nervous about my severe dyslexia stopping me from getting the instrument rating. And my friend said, with my style of repetitive, constantly in the student's ear with SOPs, he felt that, look, he would have the best chance at, getting his wish fulfilled if he trained with me. So I brought in another master CFI, a gentleman by the name of Dom Rossetti out of Chicago, who owns VLJ Mentoring. And Dom is a retired United 74777 training captain. And the two of us tag teamed on this gentleman for 5 weeks. And this gentleman, after 5 weeks, got his airplane license, his instrument rating, his multi-engine rating, and his type rating in a Phenom 300. So essentially, I did somebody's instrument rating in a Phenom 300. We still did the single engine work so he could do his instrument rating in the single engine and then move him into the jet. But it was an incredibly fulfilling experience that we were able to take someone who had a learning disability and find ways around the disability to get him to learn the material and, more importantly, be able to regurgitate it and correlate it with his actual flying. And that gentleman now is an active single-pilot jet owner-operator. And it's I get phone calls from him at least once every 2-3 weeks, and it's fascinating to see him fly. What's I think interestingly has happened with him is he has taken to the love of flying a jet by himself so much that he has stopped flying his helicopter. He still has it, but he barely flies it now, and I think he's caught the single-pilot jet bug. But I'm very privileged that I got to be his instructor and get him through with his goal of becoming a single-pilot jet jockey.
Wow. This is really interesting for me because I think I told you before the interview that I have dyslexia, and it is quite extreme. And so hearing that, were there any particular parts of the transition that were more challenging than others? I would think maybe the clearances, because I do have issues with that.
Actually, we found ways around the clearances. Sure, I think that was one of the hurdles. Clearances and intercepting and tracking radials. But the way with clearances are, there are PDC clearances that you can get with apps like flightplan.com has a service that allows you to get them. But I think in the end, people that with dyslexia, and everybody has different types of dyslexia, but where people tend to reverse numbers and reverse letters and all that, I think they have to get past their anxiety. And once they get past the anxiety and they learn that it's okay to make a mistake on a clearance, just when you don't get something or you miss something in the readout or the readback, you just go back to clearance delivery and use the terminology, say again.
Yeah.
And when they learn that you can be patient, and I think one of the biggest things that helped this gentleman was every time he got a clearance, he would say to them, I need you to spell it phonetically. So when they would say, you're cleared to the Bravo Charlie Echo VOR, direct Papa Golf Alpha VOR, he could copy all that down. Because writing the letters when you hear a letter given to you phonetically is better than hearing, direct to page or PGA. So we found all these different types of techniques that would allow that person to copy a clearance down correctly. And then I think, we felt from the get-go to set expectations correctly, we really felt that intercepting and tracking radials would be an issue because in the art and science of intercepting and tracking radials and courses, you have to reverse the number. So if you're flying out on the 020 radial, when you flip around and come back to the VOR, that number changes to the 200 course to the station. So we used many different techniques visually and graphically to get the student to understand how the concept worked, and furthermore, how they could grasp the concept and use it in their flying.
Wow, you just gave me something valuable there. I didn't even know I could ask for the clearance to come back phonetically. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's great. Well, is there any type of person you found from all the training you've done with people that learn better are better suited to jet-powered aircraft and flying?
I just think, we want pilots to be exposed to technically advanced aircraft.
Okay.
The experiment that I ran with a friend of mine's son was he had 50 hours and a private pilot's license. He did his private pilot's license in a G1000 Cessna 172. He then did his instrument rating in a G1000 Cessna 172. So then at 100 hours, we threw him into a Citation Mustang, which is also Garmin G1000. So he was familiar with the avionics, and thus we were able to get him his type rating with like 115 hours. 120 hours, he had his single pilot jet type rating, which is the lowest time pilot I've ever done. But I think, to fly jets, you've got to be really good with IFR. You've got to understand it. You've got to be able to shoot and approach down to minimums, and furthermore, you've got to be able to go missed. And I think the most difficulty we saw in all of the programs where the new planes came out, whether it was the Mustang, the Phenom 100, the Eclipse 500, was pilots who did not have a strong IFR game struggled. And I think specifically, a lot of pilots are just not good at shooting a non-precision approach, an approach that has multiple step-downs, that requires different configurations, different speeds. And I think that's what separates the men from the boys or the women from the girls.
Yeah, I love that. Before we leave, though, I want you to let everyone know where they can get in contact with you. If there's anyone dying to switch on over to a jet and want to give you a call, how can they do that?
Sure. The easiest way to get a hold of me, I'm on Facebook, and it's at facebook.com/MossY, MossY CFI. And I've got a Facebook page there. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. And my email address is jrobertmoss, JROBERTMOSS, @AOL.com. But if you just Google MossY, or you can find me also through flyinglikethepros.com, where we offer Garmin G1000 courses and Garmin 430, 530 video courses. It gives you the tips, tricks, ahas, and the gotchas. But Facebook is generally the best way of getting me. Again, that's facebook.com/MossY, MossY CFI.
Before we head on out, are there any final words you'd like to leave with our audience?
When it comes to flight instruction, I've often said, whether you get trained in the simulator or in the airplane, if you have a good instructor, you're going to have a good experience. If you have a crappy instructor, you're probably going to have a crappy experience. So if you end up in a situation like I ended up in last week with several colleagues of mine, where we had a crappy instructor, exit the program. Do not stay. Ask for an instructor change, and try to fly with someone who your style gets along with and makes it a pleasant experience. Again, if it's not going to be a pleasant instructor, you're not going to have a pleasant experience. Make the change. And I think, look, if I'm not having a good time as an instructor in the right seat, I can probably guarantee you my student isn't having a good time either. So be sure you're flying with a flight instructor who tries to make it fun and enjoyable for you. Everybody learns twice as much when they're having a good time. So try to make that a goal.
Great point, and great way to end. I want to thank you again, MossY, for coming to Savvy Central Radio.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Savvy Central Radio is home to over 100,000 listeners per month globally and runs in syndication on 8 AM and FM platforms, including iHeartRadio and 6 podcasting platforms. To find out more about our paid sponsorship opportunities or to become a guest and find out how we can help you get your message out to the world, call 718 area code 713-2289 or email at savvycentralradio@gmail.com.
Join our mailing list today by texting Savvy Radio to find out about upcoming guests and events and receive a free gift, how podcasting can help increase sales and influence in your business.